Hola amigos, this is Somveer and welcome back to CodePipe. In today's video we will see how we can make a quiz using vanilla JavaScript. Without any delays, let's see how we can do it. First of all, let me show you what we are going to do. So this is what our final product will look like. This is a simple quiz, very basic one. So if we click on this start button, it will populate a question for us. It will give us like question 1 of 5. What is the question? We have a number of options. We get a progress bar and also a next button. There are two ways of selecting our option, that is if we can click on the available option, and the next thing is we can use A, B, C, D buttons on our keyboard. Right now I am not using mouse. If I click on A, it will give me an A option. If I press on B, B option, C, C option, and D, D option. Also, if I press enter, it will go to the next question. If we complete all of the question, it will give us the result at the end. So let's try to answer all the questions. It says your score is 4 out of 5 with a thank you note. At the end, we can also retake this quiz. So if I click on retake, everything goes back to initial state and we can again start. The question starts from the first question and all the questions are repeated as of now, but this is just a demo. We can surely integrate more questions into it. So this is what we are going to do. So let's get into the coding part. I am using Visual Studio Code. There will be a card available on top right corner for the setup. Please have a look if you are not sure how to start it. Then I have a folder with the name quiz demo. I will make a file here which will be logic.txt. So what is the first thing we need to do? First of all, we need to take all the requirements that we need, and then we need to see what approach we are going to take. Not only for this project, but I will recommend to use this technique for all the projects that you do. So our logic is simple, which is first we want to have a number of questions that will be in a form of multi-step form. Which is like if we press on next, we will get the next question. Then we will have a progress bar at the bottom and also progress in terms of question 1 of 5, 2 of 5, etc. And finally we will show the result. This is our basic requirement. We need to frame our logic around this only. Now if we are talking about approach, we are using class-based approach, which is nothing but we are using OOPS concepts, or basically we are making a class using which we can initiate our quiz. Now you may ask, why a class-based approach? This is such a simple project and we do not need a class-based approach. Yes, exactly. But what we are trying to learn in these tutorial series or these videos is not only learn how to code, but how to code properly and how to code clean. So let me list out a few advantages of using class-based approach, which will look something like this. So first of all, the code will be easy to read. Then we will have some modularity. It means that the code will be divided into some chunks, which is very easy to debug. Instead of debugging the whole code and reading every line, we just need to see which chunk is giving us the error. Also, our code can be reused. We can use the same approach or same logic in different files or at different places. And there are many other advantages of using class-based approach or object-oriented programming, which we will learn in future videos. So our basic logic is ready. Then we will make a index.html file. To save some time, let me paste the HTML code here directly. We will go through it line by line. The HTML file will look something like this. First of all, we have our script embedded into it. Then we have our style.css. These links are for Google font if you are using any kind of font here. So I am using family of Just from Google Fonts. You can check on the Google font website, else you can go with the default font family of the HTML. At the top level we have a wrapper for our quiz. Inside that we have different divisions, one for the start screen. Then we have one division for our complete quiz, which will have all the options, next button, submit button, etc. And then we have one division for our quiz end screen, which will have thank you, your score, and also it will have a button for retake. So start and end screens are quite simple. Let me explain you the quiz screen. So inside the quiz screen we will have a division which will show the progress, a division for the question, and then we have a division for all the options. Inside that we are using a list with label, and we are providing it IDs so that we can use them into our JS file. The file will be available in the description resource. I'm not going into detail because I think this is not very important, as we are trying to understand how we can use JavaScript to manipulate this. So you can have your own custom HTML which you can use. Then we will make a CSS file for this, which will be style.css. Again, to save some time, let me paste the CSS code here. Now from our index.html we have an extension in VS Code which is live server. So if we try to open this with live server, you can say that this is the one which we have just initiated, and if we click on it, it is not working at all. I'm trying to click here. So we are on the main page which will say welcome to quiz, and it is not working because we have not attached the JS file. In our HTML file we have these different divisions, so I'm using this class hidden to hide all the screens. So I will cut it from here and paste it in the game start container at the last. If I check the browser now, we can see that now we have the screen for quiz. Now still it is not working and no buttons are clickable. So this is just a placeholder screen. This was just to show you how we are using the hidden class to hide our screens. Now let's go back to the initial condition, which is this one. Now it's time to start working on our quiz using JavaScript. So here I will create a new file which will be script.js, and please note that in my index.html I have already included this script as a async, and also our style.css which is here. These all are just for Google font, as we have already discussed. So don't forget to add this script and this link for style.css. Now coming to our script.js, first of all what we need to do is we need to provide one array that will contain all our question, answer and options. The quiz array will look something like this. So it will be an array of objects, and the object will contain ID, question, answer and the available options. So here we have 5 questions, so ID is 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. We can collapse this for now. And what we are going to do here is we are going to define a class. So we need to say class and start with capital letter quiz. Before getting into the class, just a small side note here, that the approach that I am using and the code that I am writing is not the most optimum solution for the problem or the requirements, but from this video what I want you to take away is how to use classes to write some clean code. So first of all we need to create a constructor. So a constructor is nothing but initialization for our quiz object. So after our class we will make objects related to this class. So constructor will initialize variables for that object. Let me increase the font a little bit. Move this aside. Now the constructor will have many things. Let me paste them here. Let us go through them one by one. First of all we will have this.quiz is equal to quiz. So we are taking this quiz and putting it inside the class so that we can reference it. Why we are doing this is, if we are using this variable at many methods inside this class, then if we are changing something in this array, then we need to change all the variables. So instead of that we are putting this in a variable to use in our class. Then we have some basic initialization like quiz start text, quiz start button, different components like current question, total question, quiz card, text of the question, the options available, etc. We can use query selector or we can use get element by ID. This is a basic thing. Then we have progress bar, and for actions we have next button, submit button, and we have some helpers here which are nothing but not on the HTML file, but we are initializing them in the class itself so that we can make our quiz effectively. So first of all we have question counter, then we have progress tab. We are showing the progress bar at the bottom, so by this we will say how much step each question will occupy. Then we have progress. This progress is different from the above progress step because this is the complete progress of the quiz, but this is just a step of single question. And at the last we have quiz score. Then we have some other variables for game over screen, quiz result total, retake button, etc. So we have initialized everything. Now let's see what process we are going to follow, or basically what we are going to do. Let me put some text here. Now first of all we will start the quiz, which means we will remove the first screen and start putting questions into it. So we will add a question, we will populate the options according to the question selected, and then we will ready the options. By ready the options I meant we will add event listeners, we will add appropriate classes and etc. Then we will add the option of selecting relevant option either by clicking on the label or the available option, or by pressing the appropriate buttons like A, B, C, D. Then we will capture the answer, we will check for the answer, and we will go to the next question. And we will do this for all the questions until we have reached our last question. On the last question we will remove the next button and we will include the submit button so that we can show the result, and we have the retake button option on the final screen with the score available. And finally we will add a method for retake that will take us to the initial state. So according to our process, let's add a method to start the quiz. As the name suggests, we can directly say start quiz. In our start quiz, first of all we will take the start quiz text and we will add the hidden class there. At the starting of video I have shown you how we are using hidden class to hide or show our different states of the quiz. Then we will say quiz card, which is basically where we have our question and options, and we will remove the hidden. And so this will basically hide the starting screen and it will give us the quiz card. Now if we check our browser and if we click on start, nothing is happening. We are not able to do anything. So for this to work, we need to do a couple of things more. We have just added a method. We have not referenced it anywhere, or we have not defined any object which can use it. What we can do is we can go into our constructor and we will take start button, which is I believe quiz start button. Yep. And we can say add event listener. On click I will add here this dot start quiz, and remember we are not using parentheses here because we are not calling it at this step. This is referenced as a callback. Now let me make an object for this. So after the class declaration I will say const sample is equal to new and quiz. So we are adding the add event listener into our constructor, so we don't need to do anything here. If we are using this new here, it means all our variable in our constructor has already been initialized. So let's save this and check our browser now. But again, if we are trying to click on this start, it is not working. There is a good reason for this, and let me explain you why. This is happening because we have added an event listener on our quiz start button, but we have not binded our event listener callback to these particular methods, which means if I use here bind and this, now it should work fine. We are binding the object that we are creating to these methods. In simple terms, the use of this keyword is not very easy to understand at first, but we will try to learn this as we go along. Now if we check our browser, if we click on start, this should run, but it is not running. So let's quickly check our console if we have any error, and it says we have some error, cannot read properties of undefined reading bind. So we have something with the bind in our code. If we see, okay, this should be inside this, so that we are binding this method to the object. Let's save this and try again. If I click on start, we can say that the question has been added. So now we can see that the start screen has been removed and we are getting the placeholder for our question and options. Now according to our process, what we need to do is we will need to add a question. So for that we will add a method here, that will be add question. So what we will pass here is, we will pass here question, and we will also pass total question. This question is supposed to be an object of this quiz array that we have defined. So it will have id, question, ans and options. So going back to add question, I will add this code here. Let me try to explain it. First of all, in our question text dot text content, we will put our question that we are getting from the object from array that we have just seen on the top. Then we have our current question and total question. This is nothing but, on our web page we see here question 1 of 5. So this one is our current question and this 5 is our total question. And this is the question text. These are all the options. This is the progress bar and this is the button. So we are putting the question text, then we are putting the current question and total question, and for all the options that we have in our in this question, we will put them inside the option buttons. And finally we will increase the question counter that we have initialized as 0 here. So basically we will be using this to see we are on which question and which question needs to be put in the next step. Now what we need to do is, we need to put this question as soon as we start our quiz, or basically as soon as we get our first screen. We don't need the placeholder, we directly need the question. So I will use this method inside this start quiz. So I will say this dot add question, and here we need to provide a question and total question. So what I am going to do here is, I will say this dot quiz, and I will take question counter so that I can get what question we are on and what we want. And finally we will say this dot quiz dot length so that we can get the total number of questions available. Along with this, let me take this chance to put our progress bar, as we are putting a question, so we have some progress. So we are getting the width of the progress bar and we are putting the total progress in our width. So let's save this and check our browser. In our browser, if we click on start, we can say that we have our initial questions as 1 of 5, then we have our correct question, we have our options available, and we have some progress. Until here everything looks fine. If we click on the options, we are not able to select. So according to our process, we have added the question, we have populated the options. Now we need to ready the options. For that, let me make a method which will be ready options. So inside this, what we are trying to do is, on our browser, for options, if we are clicking on this A option, all the others should be not selected. So basically we are trying to do this when I use the ready options method. For that I will put this code here. Let me try to explain it. We have our option labels, which is nothing but, in our constructor we have defined on all the labels that are available on the screen. Then for each of the option I am using a add event listener, which on click will either add or remove the option active label. This class is nothing but, as we are using the hidden class to hide and show our different states of the quiz, we are using this option active label so that we can show which option is actively selected. So what we are looking here is, if we are clicking on an option and if it is already selected, we need to deselect it. But if it is not selected, we need to select it. And if we are selecting one option, all the other options should be deselected. So this is in the else part. So this is how we can ready our options. Now this is a new method and we are not using it into start quiz, and we are not using it into any add event listeners. So we need to run it somehow. For that, what I will do is, I will create a new method here which will say display quiz, and inside this I will say this dot ready options. Now again we are not binding this to anything, so I can go to my object and say sample dot display quiz. It will run this method, and inside this method it will run the ready options method, which will ready my options. So if we look at the web page, if we start and let's try to click any option here. If we are clicking, it is selecting that option. If we are clicking again, it is deselecting that option. Or let's say I have selected this and I am going to select this third option. So what it should do is it should select this one and it should deselect all the other three if they are present. So if I click here, you can see that this is unselected and this is selected. So our ready options method is working fine. Coming back to the process, now in our process we are done with this. Now we need to create a method which will allow us that we can press any letters like A, B, C, D and the appropriate option is selected. For that, what I am going to do is I am going to create a new method above this display quiz that will be key options. You can name it anything. I am using key options. Here what I am going to do is I am going to add an event listener to the document itself. So it will be document.add event listener, and the event listener that I want to listen to is key down. I will pass on the event as an arrow function. Inside here I will check which key is pressed. For that I will use this line of code, which is basically if we are pressing anything we can get it in e.key. So we can also check this by using console.log and checking the event that we are passing, and we will see that for e.key we are getting that keystroke. So I am checking if it is A or B or C or D. Now if the keystroke is any one of them, I want to create another method which will select the appropriate option. Not going to overload this method here. So for that I will use an if condition. This if condition will check if I am getting any keys pressed on these buttons. If any one of them is pressed, then I will call this method of the class by sending it the appropriate key. Or there is one more condition, that is if we are pressing the enter button. So for that what we need to do is we need to see if we have next button available on our screen. If it is available, then we will press it. For that what I am going to do is I am going to check if it is not hidden, which means if this next button classes does not contain hidden, I will click it. Or here what the next condition could be, if we are on the last question, we should not get the next button, rather we should get the submit button. So at that time we need to press submit button. So for that I will use an else if condition. So I will check if the next button is hidden and the submit button is not hidden. Only at this condition we will press the submit button. Let's save this, and now it's time to create this method. So I will create a new method with the same name. Here what I am going to do is I will take this e.key which is passed in this method and use it to somehow select our appropriate option. I will pass on the argument of opt, which is nothing but option. Now before writing this method, let's go to index.html to understand what we are going to do. If we go to our options, this is our option container and we have a list of labels basically. So what I am going to do is I am going to use this id, and if you notice I am using op_a, op_b, c and d, which resonates with the keystroke that I am looking at. So I will use this id to add the classes of option active label and remove the class if it is not selected. So going back to script.js, if I put this code, first of all I am taking this option or opt or any keystroke that we are providing to this method. I am creating an id of its own, which is op_a, b, c or d, which we have just seen in our index.html is the id for option label also. Then I am looping through all the options that we have for the particular question, and if this id is equal to the option id, then I am adding the class of option active label, else we will remove the class from the option. Let's save this and check our browser. So we will start this, we will try to click, it is working. Now I'm not using my mouse, and let me try to select it with the help of keystrokes. So if I say A, it should select the first option, and it is not selecting. So let us check the console. There is nothing wrong in the console that is related to our options. So let's head back to the class. Everything looks good. What I think we missed is we need to add this into our display quiz so that this is called upon. This dot key options, and we will keep it as a method. Let's save this and check again. Start. I'm not using my mouse, and if I press A, it is selecting the first option. If I press D, it should press the last option, and it is. Let's try with C and B also. C, B, and it is working fine. Okay, so far so good. Let's close the console. Now what we need to do is, whenever we are clicking on this next button, what should happen is this text should change. We should change the question also, all the options. This progress should be increased, and also we should capture the answer, and we should also check it and keep it somewhere scored as a quiz score. So for that, in our class we will define which will be capture answer. So basically it will capture the selected answer, and it will check if it is correct or not. First of all, we will get the selected label, and I can get this using this class name. So we will be only having a single label which will have this class. So what I'm going to do is I will use this. I'm using getElements.className, which is plural, so it will give me an array. And as I was saying, we will only have one option or one label which will be selected. So I am using this 0 here to get that element. For now, let's try to console log this selected label and see what we are getting. And this capture answer should be triggered whenever we are clicking on the next button. So inside our display quiz, I will say this dot next button, we should have it, and add event listener. On click, this should be an arrow function here, and along with this capture answer we are also going to define a method which will be add another question to it. So for that I will say this dot capture answer, and after some time we will add here another method. So let's check our browser. Select any option and click on next. Let's see our console. We selected the A option. So here we can see that we are getting the complete HTML content for this. So what we are looking for is, we are looking for this option or this text, and we are going to compare it with the answer that is present in our question object. So what we can do is, from this HTML node or this element, we can take the first child. For that, what I am going to do is, inside our capture answer, I will use a condition. If we have the selected label, we will take the first children and we will get the inner text. A side note here that we should always use the inner text, because if we use text value or inner HTML, that will change as soon as we add the next question to it. This is quite hard to explain, but we should always use inner text to get the correct answer that we have selected. As soon as we have our selected answer, we will check it with the answer that we have from the question object. So until here we are taking out the object using question counter, and then we are using the answer to get the proper value from the answer key. So if we are satisfying this condition, our quiz score will increase, otherwise it will stay the same. My apologies here. We are using this question counter -1. Why? Because if we check our method, which is start quiz, we are adding one question immediately to the screen. So at this point our question counter will be 1, because in our add question we are increasing the question counter. So as soon as we start the quiz, our question counter is at 1, but in our quiz we want the first object which will be at the index of 0. So that's why we are using this question counter -1 inside our capture answer method. So using this we will get the appropriate question object and we will have the answer key. Now let's check if we are able to increase the score or not. So this dot quiz score. Let's start again. Who invented the light bulb? We all know this is Thomas. But again, let's check in our array. On the top inside our array, we have this first question. Who invented light bulb? Answer is Thomas Alva Edison. So let's try if we can score something. So if I click on Thomas Alva Edison and if I click on next, I can say that this is the selected label and this one is our quiz score, which means we are successfully able to check the answer with the correct answer. Now to add next question on the screen, what we can do is we will add one more method inside the event listener for next button. So this dot add question, or let me say next question, which we will define just now. So we need to define this. We will define it here. Inside our next question, let me put this code and we will go through it line by line. What we are doing here is our question counter keeps track of on which question we are currently on. So what we are trying to do is, if we are not on the last screen or last question, we will keep the next button as it is. But if we are on the last question, we will remove the next button and put the submit button. So this condition is for that. So if we are not on the last question, what we will do is we will just add a question, which is nothing but a method which we have already defined on the top, which is this one. So it will take on the question and total questions and it will increase the counter at the end. Going back to our next question, so it will add the question. But if we are on the last question, what we need to do is we will add the question. Also we will remove the next button and we will unhide the submit button. Once all this is done, we need to also put our progress inside our progress bar. So we will again increase the width of our progress bar by adding the progress step to our total progress. We have already defined this in the add event listener. So let's save this and try. Let's start and click on answer, and if I click on next, it is checking for the answer as well as it is changing the question, it is changing the number of question, it is changing the options, and it is adding the progress bar, which is what we wanted. And if we go on the last question, which is fifth one, everything looks okay. If we are on the fifth question, the progress bar is completed, we have different options, different question, and we have this submit button. So our method is working fine. At this point, we are able to create a multi-step form quiz and we are also able to check our score for it. We will show the result of this quiz on the final screen, and for that we will add the event listener to this submit button. This is what we have mentioned in our process. Let's check it out. Capture answer done, check for answers and go to next question done. We are doing it for all the questions done. And as we can see here, we need to now show the result and the retake option on the final screen. For that, we will create a method which will be called end quiz, because at this point we are ending our quiz. What we are going to do is, for our quiz card, we will add the class of hidden. We have already hidden the start screen, and at this point we are hiding the quiz card where all the questions and options are present. And for game over screen, we will remove the hidden class. And there will be a span of quiz result score and quiz result total. There we will say out of the length of questions, which is nothing but total questions, we are scoring this much. In our index.html, if we check our end screen, which is this one, we are already using the hidden to hide it at the first. Then we have this spans where we will have the score, and this span will have the total number of questions, and there will be a button for retake option. So let's check our quiz. This is going to the initial screen because we are not changing anything into the index.html, and as soon as we change into VS Code, this will be reloaded. So let's put any options here. Wright Brothers, largest 4-digit, founder of Google, longest river, and if I click on submit, it is not happening. Nothing is happening because we forgot to add the event listener on this. So let's go back to our code. In our script.js, we will use this end quiz, and in our display quiz, we will say this dot quiz end button. If we have it, we don't have it, so I think we have submit button dot add event listener. On click, I will add an arrow function here which will invoke this function or method. Remember that when we are on the final screen, we are also required to capture the answer for the last question. So I will also use this here, and here I will say this dot end quiz. This should work now. Let's save this and check. Start Alva Edison, Wright Brothers 99. And if I click on submit here, this gives us the final screen which is thank you and your score. We can see here that our score is increasing as we go along. Now one final thing is, if we click on this retake, everything should go back to the normal thing. And finally I will add here reset quiz method, and what we will do is we will try to take our quiz to the initial state by using this. So we will remove the game over screen. We have already hidden the quiz card when we have initialized end quiz method. Then I will make the question counter 0, progress step as the initial, progress is the initial progress, and we are using quiz score as 0. And let's not forget to add this into our reset button add event listener. So inside our display quiz, after this I will say retake button add event listener, and I will say reset quiz. So let's try it out. Start, put anything. If we submit here, we are getting the score. So if we click on retake, we are going to the initial screen, and let's start this. We are getting questions correct, question text correct, options correct, we have correct progress, but here we are getting the submit button. So for this we need to check our start quiz method. So in our class, if we check the first method that we created, which is start quiz, inside here if I hide the submit button and unhide the next button, I think it should work. So if I use this code here where I am hiding the submit button and unhiding the next button, it should work. Now let's retest. If we have the very initial state, let's remove our console as we know everything is working. Start, A enter, C enter, D enter, B enter, D and enter. We are getting the correct score. If we click on retake, we are going to the initial screen and start again. Again it is giving us the same thing with all the similar functionality. This means that our quiz is now working perfectly fine. And if we look at our code, let me decrease the zoom here, and here we can see it is quite neat and clean, and we can easily understand what's what. So if we collapse everything, now we can see that we have very few methods, and these methods are reused inside some other methods also, and this is easy to read. If we are getting error at any place, we can see, we can debug easily. If we are getting any error in adding questions, we can go to this method and check for the error or the cause of error. Now we can use this class to make any kind of quiz as long as we have the same HTML files, because we are using a constructor or where we are using the variables based on the HTML file. Again, these can be changed according to our requirements. And we are doing all this with just one method, which is display quiz, for this object that we have initialized using the quiz class. With this, I conclude the video here, as we have finally created an quiz using vanilla JavaScript, and we have also learned how to use class and methods to perform different activities. And I recommend everyone watching this video to use class-based approach or object-oriented programming anywhere possible, as this is a good way of writing code, and this is very helpful professionally also. So if you like the video, please leave a thumbs up. Let us know what you think about the video and the quiz in the comment section. If you are coming here for the first time, do not forget to hit the subscribe button, push the notification bell, do not miss any videos in the future. We will meet very soon with a new video. Until then, this is Omvir taking your leave. Adios.